Thanks for all your support for this important work. And I just want to give a personal shout out to Ken Jenkins, who has been devoted to this year after year after year. I've known Peter Phillips for over 20 years, and he is a skeptical intellectual. And boy, do we need more of those around here. He's professor of political sociology at Sonoma State University, going back to 1994. He directed Project Censored from 96 all the way until 2010, and was president of the Media Freedom Foundation from 2003 to 2017. He's been editor or co-editor of 14 editions of Censored, co-editor with Dennis Liu of Impeach the President, The Case Against Bush and Cheney, 2006, editor of 2 editions of Progressive Guide to Alternative Media and Activism, 1999, 2004, co-host of the weekly Project Censored show on KPFA and 40 stations across the country, co-hosting with Mickey Huff from 2010 till 2017. He teaches courses in political sociology, sociology of power, sociological media, sociology of conspiracies, and investigative sociology. He's winner of the Firecracker Alternative Book Award in 1997 for Best Political Book, the Penn Censorship Award 2008, the Dallas Smythe Award from the Union for Democratic Communications in 2009, and the Pilar Human Rights Award from the National Associations of Whistleblowers 2014. He lives in a redwood forest near Bodega, California, with his wife, Mary Leah. And his new book is Giants, The Global Power Elite. It's available from 7 Stories Press, and I believe it's for sale in the lobby. Will you please welcome Peter Phillips?
We know the official stories and
All right. There we go. Welcome to the sociological world of the global power elite. This is the book we present that shows how transnational elites interact as a class of people and function as managers of global capital. We identify over 300 power elites as the key managers of concentrated capital. These people are the power elite core of the transnational capitalist class. They generally know each other, often personally, and do business together. They hold significant personal wealth, share similar educational and lifestyle backgrounds, and retain common global interests. Nearly all serve on the boards of directors of the major capital investment firms or other major corporations and banks. They meet in non-governmental policy organizations, form new ones as needs arise, and privately make decisions that government, security forces, and world institutions implement. Jeff Bezos is listed by Bloomberg as the world's richest person, currently worth $160 billion. He's the founder and CEO of Amazon, owner of the Washington Post, a Princeton University graduate. Right behind Bezos is Bill Gates at $96 billion, co-founder of Microsoft, graduate of Harvard class of 75. Next, there's Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway. These are the 3 richest people in the world. Gates and Buffett make major philanthropic donations to charities of their choice. All receive significant attention from the corporate media. However, while individually wealthy and capable of significant influence on the world scene, they are not individually part of the global power elite listed in this book. They are very big trees in a forest of power. And the sociology of this is that elites are networks of power, institutionally connected, that exercise collective influence and power in the world through transnational organizations. They manage and facilitate concentrated global capital at an international level. So after 2001, many of us begin to question the veracity of the 9/11 Commission report. Early on, Project Censored reported on the many contradictions in the government's official report. In 2006, we published a research study on how U.S. leadership was dominated by a neoconservative group of people centered in the Project for the New American Century. These people in the U.S. were the ones who shared a goal of obtaining U.S. military power worldwide. This global dominance group, in cooperation with the military contractors and the government, became a powerful force in world military unilateralism and U.S. political process. David Gray Riffin, in his new book, 9/11 Unmasked, contributes to that in that tradition, and I just reviewed that this last week. At the time, though, and over this period, what we failed to acknowledge was the expanding power of the global power elites, the transnational consolidation of global capital. 9/11 was a landmark year for this transition that allowed accelerated centralization of investment capital on a global scale. Central to the idea of globalized power elite is the concept of the transnational capitalist class, theorized in academic literature for some 20 years. Giants reviews the transition from the nation-state power elites described by C. Wright Mills in 1956 to a transnational power elite centralized on the control of global capital in the world today. The global power elite function as a non-governmental network of similarly educated, wealthy people with common interests of managing, facilitating, and protecting concentrated global wealth and ensuring the continued growth of capital. In Giants, a Global Power Elite, we follow in the tradition of C. Wright Mills, the book, his Power Elite from 1956. Like Mills, we seek to raise the awareness of power networks affecting our lives and the state of society and the world. Mills described the power elite as those who decide whatever is decided of major consequence. 62 years later, power elites have globalized and built institutions that facilitate the preservation and protection of capital investments everywhere in the world. Capitalist powers exist around the world. The globalization of trade and capital brings the world elites into an increasingly interconnected relationships to the point that scholars over the past few decades have begun to theorize the development of the transnational capitalist class. In one of the early works, 18 years ago, The Transnational Capitalist Class by Leslie Sklar from the London School of Economics and Political Science, he argued that globalization had elevated transnational corporations to more influential international roles. The result is nation-states actually become less significant than international agreements developed through the World Trade Organization and other international institutions. Emerging from these multinational corporations is a transnational capitalist class whose loyalties and interests, while still rooted in their corporations, are increasingly international in scope. Our effort was to identify the most important networks of the global power elite. In the book, we named over 300 individuals who are the core of the policy planning, non-governmental networks that manage, facilitate, and protect the continued concentration of global capital. The global power elites are the activist core of the transnational capitalist class. They serve the function of providing ideological justification for their shared interests and establishing actions for implementation by nation states and transnational government organizations. Deep inside the transnational class is what David Rothkopf calls the superclass. In his 2008 book, Superclass, the Global Power Elite in the World They Are Making, Rothkopf, who worked for Kissinger for many years, argued that the superclass constitutes 6,000 to 7,000 people, or 1/1,000% of the world population. They are the Davos-attending, jet-flying, mega-corporation interlock, policy-building elites of the world. People at the highest peak of global power. They are 92% white male, predominantly from North and America and Europe. Rothkopf claims that these people are the ones setting the agenda at the G7, the G20, NATO, the World Bank, and the WTO. They are from the highest levels of finance, capital, transnational corporations, the government, the military, the academy, national, non-governmental organizations, spiritual leaders, and even elites inside the national security organizations. William Carroll's book, The Making of the Transnational Capital Class, came out in 2010, focuses on the consolidation of transnational corporate policy networks between 1996 and 2016. According to this analysis, the average number of members on corporate boards had dropped from 20 to 14 in this 10-year period. Furthermore, financial organizations were increasingly the center of these networks. Carroll argues that elites at the center of these networks benefit from extensive ties to each other, providing both the structural capacity and class consciousness necessary for effective political solidarity. University of California, Santa Barbara sociologist William I. Robinson wrote The Introduction to Giants, the Global Power Elite. He writes that we are living through times of dire global crisis. Social polarization and worldwide has reached unprecedented levels. These figures compiled by the International Development Agency, Oxfam, are now well known. The richest 1% of humanity in 2017 controls half of the world's wealth, and 20% control 95%. In 2004, Robinson wrote his book, A Theory of Global Capitalism, Production Class in the State and Transnational World, and he said that 500 years of capitalism had led to a global shift in which all human activity was transformed into capital. In this view, the world has become a single market which privatized all social relationships. Robinson's book, Global Capitalism and the Crisis of Humanity, helps us understand how the concentration of wealth is causing world crisis. Robinson claims that the world faces an unprecedented crisis of social inequality, environmental deregulation, global violence, economic destabilization, and he says the world system has centralized and over-accumulated capital to the point that investment opportunities are limited. There are only three mechanisms for investing excess capital: risky financial speculation that led to the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis, wars and war preparation, and the privatization of public resources worldwide. In our research, we identify the people on the boards of directors of the top 17 asset management companies in the world. These firms have in excess of $1 trillion that they manage. Now think about a trillion. A trillion is 1,000 billions. So these 17 giants collectively have 199 people on their boards. This group of 199 individuals represents the central financial core of the world's transnational capitalist class. In 2017, they collectively managed $41.1 trillion, and they operated in nearly every country in the world. They are the central decision makers regarding the financial capital that powers the global economic system. Western governments, international policy bodies work in the interests of this financial core to protect the free flow of capital investment anywhere in the world and the continuing returns needed from capital growth. These financial giants represent the interests of several 100,000 millionaires and billionaires who comprise the richest people in the top 1% of the world's hierarchy. The top asset management company in the world is BlackRock, with $5.4 trillion in 2017, based in New York City, and now operates with over $6 trillion in 2018. Second is Vanguard, based in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, has management of $4.3 trillion in 2017, now over $5 trillion in 2018. Next is J.P. Morgan Chase, valued with worth of over $3.8 trillion under management. Allianz, which owns PEMCO here in the U.S., $3.3 trillion in assets under management, based in Munich, Germany. PEMCO is the #1 major bond investor in the U.S. UBS, $2.8 trillion under management in 2017, based in Switzerland. The rest of them are the 17 giants of the Bank of America at $2.5 trillion, Barclays at $2.5, State Street at $2.4, Fidelity Investment, FMR, at $2.1, Bank of New York Mellon at $1.7, AXA at $1.5 in Paris, Goldman Sachs at $1.4, Credit Suisse $1.3, Morgan Stanley and Amun Credico from France. These are the top 17 asset management companies in the world. Collectively, they have 199 directors, and they're managing $41.1 trillion of wealth, and that was 2017. It's closer to $50 trillion this year. The top asset management firms invest in each other, making this network a solid core of interconnected companies with shared interests worldwide. JP Morgan and 14 other trillion-dollar giants are invested directly in BlackRock. The 17 giants collectively invested over $400 billion in each other, and that's just what NASDAQ showed us. That's not complete, they're all of their investments. Capital concentration is continuing at an accelerated rate. In 2017, during the course of writing this book, 3 asset management firms acquired giant status by having more than $1 trillion of investment capital. Those are the ones in green. New giants are P&S, Paribas from France, Northern Trust from the U.S., and Wilmington Management Company from the U.S. We also looked at the next 9 near giants that had over $800 billion. That's the orange ones there. Most of the new giants are cross-invested with all the 17 major giants. The concentrated wealth of all of this network of 25 firms exceeds $50 trillion in 2018. It's important to note that most of the giants, or near giants, are heavily invested in Silicon Valley. Technology companies like Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, and Facebook take the lead with hundreds of billions of dollars there. Exciting news for capitalism was the recent achievement of the $1 trillion value of both Amazon and Apple, making them the first corporation to attain such a lofty status. Driving the engine of global wealth concentration, the giants are the giants of transnational management firms. In the case of Amazon, the top investment management firms are Vanguard at $56 billion, BlackRock at $49 billion, FMR at $33 billion, Capital at $33 billion, State Street at $29 billion, to the point that the giants hold 58% of Amazon shares. So that's pushing Bezos, making him richer, but they're enriching themselves as this goes along. Certainly, some investment collaboration between these companies can be inferred. The fact that the 17 giants are highly interconnected and interinvested is very clear. This penetration of financial investment creates a vast consolidation, a centralized global capital with a clear commonality of interest promoting collective growth, and however, growth isn't always good. Our 17 giants are invested with over $55 billion in Coca-Cola. Coke is a major contributor to obesity, type 2 diabetes, and tooth decay. More than 10 teaspoons of sugar are in every single bottle of Coke. Some 184,000 deaths annually are linked to drinking Coke or similar sugary beverages. Coca-Cola is the world's largest soft drink company. It released 110 billion single-use plastic bottles into the environment in 2017. Only a tiny fraction of those bottles will ever be recycled, and it takes 450 years for a plastic Coke bottle to degrade in the environment. The world's total wealth is estimated to be at close to $255 trillion, with the U.S. and Europe holding approximately 2/3 of that total. Meanwhile, 80% of the world's people live on less than $10 a day. The poorest half of the population lives on less than $2.50 a day, and more than 1.1 billion live on only $1.25 a day. 795 million people on the planet are suffering from chronic hunger, according to the UN World Food Program. Each year, poor nutrition kills 3.1 million children under the age of 5. 25 to 30,000 people a day die from starvation and malnutrition. That's a slaughter worldwide. Yeah. Well, I'll get there. I don't have a solution per se. Get rid of that. This slaughter is occurring around the world as 10 million people are dying. Chronic hunger is mostly a problem of distribution, as 1/3 of all food produced in the world is wasted and lost. The 9/11 wars continue to wreak havoc, chaos, and death on the Middle East, Africa, and other regions. In 2017, there were more than 65 million people displaced as refugees fleeing war or famine. These wars are not just a result of military adventurism and political conflicts, but are motivated both by propagandized ideological fears and mainly the desire for profit on military investments. Permanent war on terrorism is good for business and capital investment. War becomes an institutionalized mechanism for continued elite capital concentration and growth. For many, the ultimate crisis of humanity is short of global nuclear war is environmental degradation. Religious scholar David Ray Griffin asks in his book, Unprecedented, can civilization survive the CO2 crisis? Since pre-industrial times, the temperature has risen 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit, causing significant changes in the world's weather. The giants are heavily invested in the 100 companies that are the source of 70% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. There is at least a 10-year lag between CO2 emissions and temperature changes. So even if CO2 emissions are drastically cut now, we'll continue to see rising temperatures for decades ahead. These rising temperatures will lead to increasingly severe weather events, extreme storms, record-breaking heat and cold, floods, tidal surges and fires, high death rates, and financial losses. These disruptions and shortages will lead to climate wars and civil unrest. All of this will, in the near future, if left unchecked, result in ecosystem collapse and massive extinction of life on Earth. Now, the global power elite identified in this book are the central capitalist money managers. Each year, they accumulate greater concentration of wealth and are embedded in unrequesting quest for more. The most important concern for the power elite is protecting capital investment, ensuring debt collection, and building opportunities for future returns. If protecting the environment is profitable, then green investments are acceptable. But what remains unacceptable is the spending of money on people, the environment, and services that do not benefit capitalism and give them a return. This lack of concern for human betterment, intended or not, is the core contradiction of the transnational capitalist class and the true crisis of capitalism. Revising this madness is the duty of all humanitarian-oriented people. We believe that naming the global power elite, we can encourage enough of them to recognize their humanitarian impulses, whereby they will collectively, under intense pressure from social movements, encourage and organize a reshaping of our global economy and face the reality of environmental crisis. In Giants, we identify the 199 people on the board of directors of the 17 asset management companies. These 199 represent the financial core of global capitalism. They are the decision makers regarding the financial capital that powers the global economic system. Western governments and international policy bodies work in the interests of this power elite financial core to protect the free flow of capital investment and debt collection everywhere in the world. So just who are these people? We're going to look at a few. Jamie Dimon. He's the CEO of JP Morgan Chase. He's on the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. He's in the World Economic Forum, the Council of Foreign Relations. He's a trustee at the New York University School of Medicine, which is, we can find him in all of these places, so he's not too hard to find. He went to Tufts University, Harvard Business School, MBA. His net worth today is $1.3 billion. He gets $27.5 million from J.P. Morgan Chase, and he has $1.3 billion worth of J.P. Morgan stock. Lloyd Blankfein, he's CEO of Goldman Sachs. He's also the group in the Dean's Council of the Harvard University. He's on the World Economic Forum, the Council of Foreign Relations. He has a BA and a JD from Harvard. His net worth is $1.1 billion. Sachs compensates him $20 million in 2016. He just has recently announced his retirement as CEO of Goldman Sachs. They'll just replace him with somebody else. It'll be the same, you know. Larry Fink, Lawrence Fink, CEO of BlackRock, PNC Financial Groups. They'll trade people on their boards because PNC is highly invested in BlackRock. He's on the New York Stock Exchange. He's on the Council of Foreign Relations, the Business Roundtable. He's a trustee at New York University, the Museum of Modern Art. He goes to the World Economic Forum and the International Council. He's the director of he's on the Council of Foreign Relations as a director. He's a BA, MBA from UCLA, and he was awarded the CEO of the Decade by Financial News, and he's worth about $493 million. Erskine Bowles, he's the lead director of Morgan Stanley. He's on the board of Facebook, Norfolk Southern. Let me just do this, all right? You got to know these people. It's really important. And I list all 200, and I ask you to read all 200 bios in the book. Because when you do that, there's a qualitative interpretation that gets into your mind. You go, okay, I get it who these people are, and they are interconnected. He was on the envoy to the United Nations. He was chief of staff for the president. He's married to Crandall Bowles, and this is the only married couple in this top 200. She's director of J.P. Morgan Chase. She's on Sarah Lee's board, the World Economic Forum. And their net worth together is approximately $60 million. That was in 1999, so it's probably 3 times that. Reuben Jeffries, director of Barclays, CEO of Rockefeller Center, National Security Council, Council of Foreign Relations, World Economic Forum. He has Goldman Sachs stock worth $80 million. Barclays pays him $157,000 to be on their board. Now, a lot of people are on multiple boards, and that's their source of income. Dambisa Moyo from Zambia. She's a director of Barclays Bank. She's also on the Barrick Gold Corporation. She's on Chevron Corporation. She goes to World Economic Forum, Bilderberg Group. She graduated from St. Anthony's College in Oxford. And her compensations are multiple, you know, $200,000, $150,000 from Barclays. So she's on multiple boards and making over $1 million just to be on boards of directors. So these 199 directors are a very select set of people. They all know each other personally or know of each other. These power elites are the 17 most centralized asset management firms of the world. They represent the central core of global capital. These are the power elite managers from 2017, but these people can retire or pass away, and other people will move into their position, making an overall structure of a self-perpetuating network of global capital control. The global giant corporate board they meet on a regular basis to maximize their profits. They are responsible for any illegal activities by their firms. J.P. Morgan Chase, UBS, Barclays, and 13 other of the giants were all implicated in the LIBOR scandal that falsified data using to create the benchmark rates going back to 2003. This means that interest rates on auto, home, student loans, credit cards, mortgage, and commercial loans were all manipulated, and we all paid for that. The Financial Service Agency of Great Britain fined Barclays $450 million. U.S. and European regulatory agencies and charged J.P. Morgan Chase and others, Citigroup, hundreds of millions of dollars. Deutsche Bank paid $2.5 billion in fines, so they all pay fines, but to them it's just a cost of doing business. Nobody goes to jail. In 2015, Citibank J.P. Morgan Chase, Barclays, Royal Bank of Scotland, UBS, all paid $5 billion in fines to the U.S. Justice Department and other regulators for manipulating the global currency exchange markets. Now, we don't claim that any single person identified in the study has done anything illegal. We only point out that the institutional and structural arrangements within the money management system of global capital relentlessly seek ways to achieve maximum return on investment, and that conditions of manipulation are always present. These 199 manage the top 17 firms. They have very similar backgrounds and training. They all attended elite colleges. 28 attended Harvard and Stanford. People from 20 nations make up the financial core. And they're spread around between 60% from U.S., but Britain, France, and a dozen other countries around the world. Most of the financial core take active part in policy groups and governments. Financial core directors are advisor to the World Bank. And the World Bank voting power is based on how much money you put in. So the government, the United States, has a 15.8 voting share. Japan is second, then China, then Germany. So the more money you have in the bank, the more you get to have power to say things. International Monetary Fund is similar. Its primary purpose is to ensure the stability of the international monetary system. Bank members have voting power related to their country's economic standing. The G20 is the international forum for governments and central bank governors from the 20 most strongest economies in the world. The G7 is the 7 wealthiest advanced countries: Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, UK, and US. They kicked Russia out. They used to be the G8. They kicked Russia out. But China is wealthier than all those countries, or most of them, and it's excluded because IMF and the other global capitalist institutions do not consider China an advanced country due to its low net worth per adult. The World Trade Organization is an intergovernmental organization that regulates international trade. WTO had governance favors are economically the most powerful countries. The International Bank of Settlements. These are all transnational state organizations, so they govern worldwide. It's an international financial institution owned by the central banks in 60 countries to foster international monetary and fiscal cooperation. It's important to note that all these 4 named international organizations are controlled by government and governmental institutions, offering the strongest voting rights to economically most powerful countries. Global power elites also set up their own non-governmental organizations to discuss global economic policies and give instructions and recommendations to the WTO, IMF, and the World Bank and others. Most global economic elite managers attend the World Economic Forum in Davos. This forum is not a formal policy-making body. It serves as an educational consensus-building function for thousands of transnational capitalist elites through exclusive discussion and meetings. 1,000 global corporations with $5 billion more in income paid $25,000 per person to attend. They can send up to 5 people, as long as one of them is a woman. 3,000 people attend the 2008 Economic Forum in Davos in the snows in January at 5,000 feet level. They were mostly from the leading corporations in the world. Several hundred were from civil society and were government ministers or heads of state. Companies are allowed to bring up to 5 people. One view of the World Economic Forum is that it's similar to the annual summer encampment of the San Francisco Bohemian Club. Both events host thousands of elites, exclusively men at the Bohemian Club up in Sonoma County. Both events host these people. They hear selected keynote panels from famous, important individuals on the major socioeconomic topics of the day. There's time for discussion and meet and greet is offered to both settings. However, neither event makes formal policy recommendations or sets specific agendas for global governments or consideration. Another transnational group is the Bilderberg Group. Meetings take place annually in June at various exclusive resorts around the world. Bilderberg meetings were attended by about 150 people annually. Founded in 1954, the meetings were designed to foster dialogue between Europe and North America after World War II. The Bilderberg website says, thanks to the private nature of the meetings, participants are not bound by the conventions of their office by prearranged position. As such, they can take time to listen, reflect, and gather insights. There are no detailed agenda, no resolutions are passed, no votes taken, and no policy issues issued. The 2016 Bilderberger Group held in Dresden, Germany. Topics on the agenda were China, Europe, migration, growth, the Middle East, Russia, U.S. political landscape, debt, cybersecurity, the geopolitics of energy, commodity prices, the precariat, or the declining middle class. And it was recently noted that Dambisa Moyo, who I introduced you to earlier, attended the 2018 Bilderberger Group for the first time. The International Monetary Conference is a meeting of the top few hundred bankers in the world. The American Bankers Association serves as the secretary for this conference, and they meet once a year. Now, perhaps the most important policy group, private policy group in the world, is the Group of 30. This group describes itself as having an aim to deepen the understanding of international economics and financial issues, and to explore the international repercussions of decisions taken in public and private sectors. The G30 is a highly influential institution in the arena of global finance. Founded in 1978, it releases reports from study groups made up of the top elite bankers, financiers, policymakers, and academics in the world. These reports are widely accepted and usually implemented around the globe. The G30 is a nonprofit corporation originally funded by Rockefeller Foundation. It now receives over $1 million a year in donated funds from various private sources. The 32 G30 directors are deeply connected with the transnational institutions and central banks. It's a highly educated group. 16 of them hold PhDs from major universities. In 2017, the group had 31 men and 1 woman, Gail Kelly from the Australian Bankers Association and the International Monetary Fund. They added a second woman last year, Maria Ramos, Chief CEO Officer of Barclays Africa Group. The Group of 30 has directly linked membership to IMF, Bank of International Settlements, the World Bank, the Basel Committee, Financial Security Board, the G7, G20, WTO, and the Federal Reserve. So they're very, very powerful. They all go to Davos. 6 of our global financial giants have direct representatives on the G30 through 8 members. The G30 brings 33 of the most powerful people in the world together. They are essentially the executive committee of the global power elite. They formally develop policy, recommendations outside of government oversight, and when the G30 makes a policy recommendation, they expect it to be implemented. If they make a recommendation to the World Bank sees that as an instruction. The Trilateral Commission Executive Committee has a membership of 55 power elites. The Trilateral Commission was formed in 1973 to bring together, that is, without official government oversight, the highest level elites to address important international problems. Both the G30 and the Trilateral Commission are nonprofit corporations supported independently from government and with no government funding or regulations that allows for open discussion of global capital and security needs by people with common class and financial interests. 12 of the 17 transnational companies, giants, have 1 or more representatives on the G30 or the Trilateral Commission. Goldman Sachs has 4 directors on the core of this group. Originally, the Trilateral Commission only had representatives from the United States, Europe, and Japan. Currently, there are 375 members from 40 countries, 87 members from the U.S., 20 from Germany and Great Britain, and then Asia has 100 members, 124 members from other countries around the world. Each country has a quota and can nominate people as openings are available. Members who take formal positions in their government are asked to step down so others can join. The goal is to keep the Trilateral Commission a policy influencing body free of direct government control. In 2013-14, the Trilateral Commission issued a report entitled Engaging Russia, A Return to Containment. The report expressed alarm by the Russian invasion of the Crimea. And I have invasion in quotes in that, because the Russians, they already had bases in the Crimea, and they weren't going to give that up. President Putin was described as bringing about a ruthless break with the West, abandoning Gorbachev's vision of a Russia joining its common European home. The Trilateral Commission feels that Russia is not contributing to global stability, but rather aspires to superpower status, and U.S. business leaders are concerned about the anemic growth and economic climate in Russia. A quote from the report reads, "Russia has always was and will remain different. Acceptance of the otherness should be a premise for forming our views on Russia's future and the relationships with her. Even if Moscow seeks a normalization of the West, the nature of Putin's regime permits little more than a transactional U.S.-Russia relationship on a narrow range of issues. Putin's departure from office, however, may produce a transformational moment that propels real systematic change in the Russian system. Russian politics will have to be invented almost from the ground up, perhaps creating possibilities for rapprochement. Concerns with Putin and the topic of his removal are clearly uppermost in the minds of the trilateralists. Global power elite business leaders are salivating over the opportunities Russia's vast economic resources offer for capital investment. And certainly since 1944, an increasingly anti-Putin message has been offered in the U.S. corporate media. Key members of the Group of 30 and the Executive Council of the Trilateral Commission include Jacob Frinkel. He's a U.S. and Israeli citizen. He's chair of J.P. Morgan Chase. He's in the Group of 30, the board of councils of the Foreign Relations Economic Advisors. Another key person is Timothy Geithner, who, remember, was the former Secretary of the Treasury. He worked with Kissinger Associates. He's president of Warburg Pictures. He's director on the Council on Foreign Relations. He works with the RAND Corporation. He's on the Council of the World Economic Forum, Trilateral Commission. He goes to Bilderberg. Philip Heiderbrand. He's vice chair of BlackRock in Europe. He's former chair of the Swiss National Bank, Financial Stability Board, Group of 30, World Economic Forum, and he's part of the International Settlement Group's Swiss governor for the International Monetary Fund. Jean-Claude Trichet. He's the Bank for International Settlements, honorary chairman of the Group of 30. He goes to Bilderberg Group. He's the European chairman of the Trilateral Commission. He's governor of the Bank of France, and he's ranked by Forbes as in the top 15 of the most powerful people in the world. Axel Weber, chairman, USB, Bank for International Settlement. He's part of the Group of 30, International Monetary Fund. He's on the G7, G20, and he goes to World Economic Forum. The power elite are continually worried about their unruly, exploited masses rising in rebellion, all you guys out there. As a result of these class insecurities, elites work hard to protect their structure of concentrated wealth. The U.S. military empire has long been the protector of global capitalism. The U.S. has more than 800 bases in 70 countries and territories. U.S. military, along with NATO, is now deployed in 70% of the world's nations. U.S. Special Operations Command has troops in 147 countries. Most of the missions are training exercises, but direct action counterterrorism strikes occur regularly, including drone assassinations and kill and capture raids. The Atlantic Council is a global policy group established in 1961 as a voluntary alliance of countries in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. Its stated goal is to build policies and institutions that promote collective security and peace. This is another non-governmental policy group. With an average budget of $20 million and most of those funds from member contributions and grants, the Atlantic Council produces numerous policy reports, books, and papers. Global capital protection and the U.S. NATO security demands are their high priority. The Atlantic Council publishes recommendations and policy reports. These are created without direct government involvement. and as such offer more of a power elite interpretation of world affairs than government reports subject to congressional Democratic reviews can come up. The 35 Atlantic Council Executive Committee members are a key power elite non-governmental group that promotes financial capitalists, that combines financial capitalists with high-level security experts and establishment insiders. 19 of the executive committee members specialize in global security issues, many with decades of involvement. 14 have worked with major capital investment companies, and 19 have held high-level positions in the U.S. government, several under multiple administrations and both parties. Collectively, they supervise the building of policy and recommendations for change that people in the government, military, and politics perceive as acceptable directions for action. The U.S. NATO military command structure and administrators in government and their intelligence agencies all pay attention to the Atlantic Council's reports. Protecting global capitalism, ability to secure investment worldwide is the primary agenda. Western governments and intelligence agencies seek support to serve the interests of the global power elite. Wars are initiated to protect their interests. Uncooperative regimes are undermined and overthrown in support of the free flow of global capital for investment opportunity anywhere in the world that's returnable. Regime changes and attempted regime changes in Libya, Iraq, Syria, Venezuela, Yemen, Afghanistan, and the Balkans are all examples of wars in support of transnational capital. That's part of the theme on a 9/11 domino thing that they've got today, and I like that, because that's exactly what's been happening. The global power elite managers and facilitators know full well that war and preparation for war is highly profitable. We can see evidence of this from the investments by the giants in the top 3 military companies in the world. Lockheed Martin, invested in by State Street, Capital Group, Vanguard, BlackRock, B of A, Bank of Mellon, USB, and all the others, Goldman Sachs, to a total of $50 billion. Northrop Grumman, investments from State Street, Vanguard, BlackRock, FMR, Capital Group, and all the others to a total of $22 billion. Boeing, investments from Vanguard, Goldman Sachs, B of A, BlackRock, UBS, State Street, Fidelity, Bank of Mellon, to a total of $50 billion. So when empires are slow to perform or faced with political resistance, private security companies and private military contractors increasingly fulfill power elite demands for protection of their assets. These assets, they can provide personal security for the executives, their families, protection of safe residential work zones, targeted military advice and training of national police and armed forces, intelligence gathering on democracy movements and opposition groups, weapons acquisition, weapons systems management, and strike forces for military action and assassinations. The expanding crisis of desperate mass refugees, alienated workforces, environmental exhaustion means an unlimited opportunity for private military companies to engage in protection services for the global power elite. G4S employs 625,000 people in more than 120 countries spanning 5 continents. They are the second largest private employer in the world, right behind Walmart. G4S annual revenue is $10 billion in 2014. Increasingly, they operate in complex environments. They accept jobs that national armies are not trained to do. In Nigeria, Chevron contract with G4S for counterinsurgency operations for fast response mercenaries. G4S undertakes similar operations in South Sudan, has provided security equipment for checkpoints and prisons in Israel, security for Jewish settlements in Palestine, and G4S was among the other private security companies that were protecting the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline. They were the guys with the big dogs that were attacking the protesters. Blackwater is probably one of the best-known private security companies, now recently called Academy or Constellus. Founder Eric Prince has recently been in the news as an advisor to Donald Trump. Prince's sister, Betsy DeVos, is the Secretary of Education in the Trump administration. Constellus' newest division is EP Aviation, an air force of military helicopters providing services in Africa. The resources and power of the now consolidated Constellus make it likely one of the most powerful military companies in the world. I mean, Prince has been advocating for Trump to let him take over the management of the war in Afghanistan. Private military police. Corporate media are the ideologists for the global capital elite. Corporate media are owned and controlled by the global power elite. The corporate media today are highly concentrated, fully international. Their primary goal is the promotion of product sales and pro-capitalist propaganda through the psychological control of human desires, emotions, beliefs, fears, and values. Corporate media do this by manipulating the feelings and cognitions of human beings worldwide and providing entertainment viewing as a distraction to global inequality. Corporate media receive anywhere from 2/3 to 80% of their broadcast and print content from public relations and propaganda firms, meaning that nearly all content under the global media system today is prepackaged, managed news, opinion, and entertainment. The top 6 transnational news entertainment corporations are Comcast at $50 billion in holdings, Walt Disney Company at $55 billion in holding. The Giants have over $50 billion in Comcast. The Giants have over $40 billion in Disney. Time Warner, Giants have over $20 billion invested. Fox is a multinational mass media corporation controlled by Rupert Murdoch, with companies all over the world. Their Giants hold about $4 billion there. Barsman is a privately owned media service company in Europe with 100,000 employees, controlled by Liz Mon and her husband Reinhard and Bridget Mon. They control that company, a net worth of $4.8 billion. And Viacom and CBS are privately held by Summer Redstone and Sherry Redstone. And there's attempts by Columbia and they own CBS with 160 radio and TV stations in the country. Now, these 6 media companies control the lion's share of news around the world. They are the unofficial spokespersons for the global power elite. They are the ideological protectors of concentrated global capital. Owned and controlled by multimillionaires with heavy investments in the global giants, these companies are the foundation of capital ideological hegemony. Media consolidation and the expansion of the public relations companies, Omnicom, WPP, and Interpublic Group, these are the key contributors to the hegemony of capitalism in the world today. These companies serve corporations, government organizations, nonprofits, and they package the messages the corporate media carries. So they're massive companies. They expand the desire for a life of luxury, fear of others, terrorists, criminals, and any people perceived as a threat. They push forth the support of the police state, acceptance of permanent war, the notion that private corporations are essential to democracy. This is what Noam Chomsky called engineering opinion and parading enemies. The giants are strongly invested in these 3 big PR firms. They are engaged in the orchestration of global information and news. The result is ideological news management by government and PR firms, often interlocked. Together they release specific stories intended to build public support and deliberately deny coverage of news stories that will undermine capitalism. So now we get to the question of what is to be done. In 2017, 2.3 million new millionaires were created, bringing the total number of millionaires around the world to 36 million. There can be no doubt that a continued concentration of wealth cannot be economically sustained. Extreme inequality and massive repression will only bring about resistance and rebellion by the world's masses. The danger is the global power elite will fail to recognize the inevitability of economic or environmental collapse before making the necessary adjustments to prevent the death of millions and massive civil unrest. Without significant collective adjustments by the global power elite, mass social movements and rebellions coupled with environmental collapse will lead to global chaos and widespread war. The global power elite identified in this book are the key stewards of a major part of the world's financial wealth. Privatized wealth is able to buy ideologies, governments, law enforcement, covert activities, and ultimately human beings themselves. The direction we headed is towards a complete destruction of global governmental democracies, personal freedoms, privacy, and the economic survival of billions of people in the world. The real question is, will the global power elites take action to restructure global capitalism before social movements topple their regimes by massive civil unrest, non-cooperation, and eventual violence? Or can nonviolent social movements stimulate a consciousness of needed change within the global elites that can lead to corrective action and the redistribution of wealth to meet the common needs of the world's people? These are fundamental questions for us all. Will our grandchildren and their grandchildren have a livable planet, or will they witness the end of humankind? 70 years ago, after World War II ended, people throughout the world were motivated to find ways to permanently end such terrible bloodshed from ever taking place again. As the United Nations was forming a commission of moral principles necessary for sustainable peace, made up of 18 nations, met at Hunter's College in New York in 1946. They began the 2-year process that would become the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, approved unanimously by the United Nations in 1948. Eleanor Roosevelt and many others successfully, after 2 years of many long hours and debates, brought forward a moral document that became a standard of principles for natural human rights for all people in the world. The Universal Declaration of Rights is a document for social movements can easily adapt as a statement of moral principles for actions and resistance to wealth concentration and global inequality. It's equally important as a document of principles for the global elite to accept as a guide for corrective actions needed in the world today. The act of identifying the global power elite by name may persuade some of them to recognize their own humanity, and it gives us all targets of people to approach and write to. They could take corrective action to save the world, and they're probably the only ones capable of correcting the crisis without major civil unrest, war, and chaos. Giants is an effort to bring a consciousness of the importance of systematic change and redistribution of wealth to the 99% and to the global power elites themselves, in the hope that we can all collectively work together towards the saving of humanity. Humankind deserves nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peter Phillips. This man has really done a lot of research and connected a whole lot of dots.